be the pillars of society. Family Fest, bringing healing and rest to hurting families, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness.
Good night and welcome to Family Fest Barbados, our Family Fest Barbados celebration month of July 2025. My name is Graham Vaughan and I'm going to be your moderator this evening. Welcome. Family Fest is a charity that is focused on educating specifically Barbadians, but everyone who can tune in and listen, who can be enlightened and encouraged by what we do with education about the family. We want people to understand and learn about their families, about everything that God has for them. And each evening, we're going to be focusing on something that is a family destroyer. That's the topic of this month's discussions, family destroyers. And we want to make sure that we address each one with sincerity, with honesty, so that each person who watches this can gain knowledge that will carry them forward into the future, help them to make positive decisions about their family life. This evening, to discuss the family destroyer of substance abuse, we have with me Dr. Ronald Chase, Kerry Jordan, and Alison Goethe. Good evening to our panelists.
Good evening, Graham. Good evening, viewers.
Good evening.
Those are
Good evening,
expert
everyone.
panelists, and joining us as well is Mr. Cornelius Bartlett, who is the chairman of Family Fest Barbados. Good evening, Cornelius. This
Good evening,
evening,
Graham.
we want to discuss substance abuse in the family. And this is an extremely serious issue. So I'm going to throw first off out there to the panelists. Please define substance abuse as we will be looking at it this evening for those who are watching.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Substance abuse or substance dependence or substance use disorders or addiction. These are all terms that you will hear sometimes interchangeably. And they all refer to someone that is using, or persons that are using drugs in a manner that is considered to be excessive, used in a manner despite consequences socially or even medically. So they may miss family engagements, not renege on some of their family responsibilities, work responsibilities, miss from work, those things. May even run foul of the law as a result of using the substances, but they continually persist. They may have medical conditions which, if they continue to use, could endanger their life, but they continue to use as well. One would say, okay, well, any substance can do that, yes. But when we speak about addiction, substance abuse, substance dependence, substance use disorder, when we speak about the topic of addiction, we're speaking about persons using or doing a habit, something often, frequently, and for a period of time. Because the habits and the addiction forms not with the first use, but with continued use and repeated use for over a period of time. And that is important because if we're going to look to always prevention is better than cure, that time between first use and continuing use is important to have that early intervention. And this is especially important for children and adolescents.
Okay, Dr. Chase, I'm going to ask you to continue there. You talk about that early period of intervention. Is this something that families should be able to address because of their proximity that they should be able to recognize? And if so, what should people in families be looking for?
Persons in families should be able to recognize it. Unfortunately, today's society in Barbados has changed and everyone is very busy. Schedules are packed, and therefore the family connection and the time spent for most persons, for a lot of people, are very limited. So you may have parents who have to work 2 jobs, and therefore there's less time with their children. So to observe that is difficult, or even with their spouse. But generally, persons, when they know you, when you're close to someone, you can detect change. So people think. What happens is that usually when things when things have gotten out of hand, and there's usually something big that happens, that person say, you have a problem or there's an issue. And looking back is when they say, you know what? This started from X time. I was seeing these signs. Because sometimes the closer you are, you don't notice the minute changes. In a lot of instances, sometimes you see, like we've had a couple of times for this year, that a relative came back from overseas. They live abroad, but they came in to visit their relatives. And from the time they came, they realized, no, something is wrong. Why haven't, and they're instantly saying, well, why have we all living with the person, interacting with the person, not seeing this? And sometimes I have to remind persons, let's not judge. Let's not judge. If you are seeing something every day, you don't notice those are minute changes. But
Okay.
and even with knowing what they are and some of the changes I mean in terms of attitude and personality, in terms of you might see persons become very irritable a lot, or some persons may become withdrawn. And that usually sometimes, and if you're dealing with a child or adolescent, you would have some deviant behaviors as well. Which, as I said, some people would just brush off as being always a teenager, so you're just rude, disrespectful, and want to be defiant. Sometimes we miss those little small pieces.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. Uh, Good night, Miss Gotit, and welcome. Thank you for being here. Talk to us about the family as a place which is disrupted by these events. What are some of the things which happen to the unit, not just the symptoms that can be observed in the individual who's going through the addiction, but the symptoms that somebody perhaps looking on from the outside can say this family unit is being disrupted by something?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's really important that you would start to see like a significant breakdown in trust and emotional safety. There seems to be limited communication amongst persons, and especially if it's parents who have a substance use disorder. And I remember last time I was here, we looked at parentification and looking at the young person almost becoming the caregiver and taking on those responsibilities. So a lot of the dynamics in the family start to shift and to change, and to, there's these role reversals. I remember of a situation where the 15-year-old child was witnessing their dad coming home drunk on a regular basis, and then lying on the sofa completely naked. The child was unable to really sleep because the son, he was frightened that his dad would vomit, because there had been times that he had vomited, so he would clean up the vomit and look after him in that way. And that brings that pressure. And also, where the home is supposed to be a place of safety, it becomes a place of chaos, of crisis, persons not wanting to be around whoever has that substance use disorder. And so there's this all of this emotional detachment and isolation. So everyone's in their different quarters, as it were, within the home.
Can you go into a little bit more of, because that sounds really disturbing to have a situation where a member of the family is suddenly, especially for children,
Mm.
a member of the family is suddenly being nude, in inappropriate, behaving in inappropriate ways. Talk to us about the impact, especially on the younger members of the family in a situation like that.
So, as I said, they then sometimes take on that caregiving role, and that is what we call really an adverse childhood experience. It's really important for us to understand that for young persons, their brain is still developing, and the family is the first place where they create their narrative, their social norms, etc. And when that's interrupted, unfortunately, that becomes the norm. And so, therefore, this is, well, that's what dad does all the time. They may even try and use humor, or they may seek to avoid being at home. And the thing about the young person is, because this is the first, that, this is their primary caregiver, as I said, they create their narrative. So then that becomes normalized. So it's okay if I notice that mum goes out late at night and then she comes home with, high, or looking a bit strange with a lot of money, or I hear certain conversations I shouldn't. So then what happens is that they become exposed to things that they shouldn't be exposed to. And sometimes they will take that on as normal. And then you'll see children who are very mature for their age, having conversations or developing interactions that are not conducive to the normal development of a child.
Okay, thank you very much. Kerry Jordan, good evening.
Good evening.
Substance abuse is pretty rampant, I believe. Talk to us about the fact that it is something that affects the family regardless of where the family member is. We do talk about it in terms of a family unit, uh, the abuser coming into the family unit, into that sphere. But what about where the family member is outside of the home? They may be living someplace else. There may not be that immediate contact. How does that affect the family where the abuser is not living within the circle?
Well, first of all, if they're not living within the circle, I don't see the effect on the family circle within the home unit itself, but the effect would happen when it has to do with engaging that particular individual on a day-to-day basis, or many times they engage the individual. My particular expertise in terms of dealing with substance abuse and stuff starts most of the time on a day-to-day basis with juveniles, based on the fact that I work in the field surrounding juveniles and juvenile delinquency. And most of the time when you have that person on the outside of the family unit that is using and not in the family unit in the circle, meaning at the home in the household, it usually comes about where you have an absent parent who's not playing their role in the child's life, who's not doing much, who is um, pretty much becoming a financial strain. They're financially not supporting the family unit because the monies and everything are going towards supporting the habit. So when you ask the question about how the outside individual using drugs can affect the unit itself, it is that what they're doing, especially when it comes to children and parenting and raising the children, they're not supporting financially, and the emotional support and everything, there's a major disconnect. I really can't say for certain that the effect is, because in this day and age, a lot of families have learned to do without these persons. Um, that they've learned over time to cope without these persons in the unit, um, versus the effect of that person being in the actual unit, as Miss Gotet mentioned just now, where the dad was coming home and the children now had to take on the responsibility of taking care of the dad. But if the dad is not in the unit, then the only issue that I have now is the contact of emotional support and stuff for the children, or financial support for the children. That's not going to happen because most of the time he's under the influence of whatever drug he's taking, or the financial support he doesn't have, he or she, let me make sure I make that clear, he or she does not have the financial wherewithal to support the family unit because the money is being spent to support the habit.
Understood.
I think I
Um,
saw Mr. Dr. Chase was going to add to
go ahead,
the
please.
question.
Yes. To add to that as well, there's a flip side to it. Even in terms of where the family member isn't displaying, gross dysfunction or disruptive behaviors when they use. They seem normal. They're fulfilling their roles. They're going to work. They're coming home. They're providing. They have money. The flip side to that is, because it's not all everyone that is going to be coming home, unfortunately, and you see them with what we call them, the side effects of being intoxicated or high. But you're going to get some persons, and I think this is even more dangerous, or as dangerous, let me say more, as dangerous, when they come home and people, there's no difference. And it's dangerous for the child and adolescent, because in child and adolescent that is observing this, they know that their relative, particularly if the relative is an adult parent, such as a parent, an adult cousin, uncle, and they see them using this drug and they know they're using it, but they're acting normal, they're doing everything as they should. It then normalizes that use of substance. It also plants in them that there's no harm in using the substance. So the flip side of the impact is not in terms necessarily in trauma as one side. The other side is you normalize the behaviors, you reduce the perception of harm from using these drugs. And that comes with another tale, because you find persons that have been traumatized by their relative, particularly a parent sometimes, that they see all of these disruptive behaviors with. You will find that they will disassociate themselves from using any kind of drugs because of their subconscious connection to the drug and the hated behavior that they see. Persons know that don't see the difference between the using the drug, they're doing what they're supposed to do, there's nothing wrong. They have a higher potential now, those children, adolescents, to actually use any drug. So when they're starting to use a drug and they start to have, I say, behavioral issues at school or even in the home, to tell them, and this is where the messaging and the therapy becomes, for teenagers particularly, very different. To tell them that this is harmful, just to say that drugs are bad, isn't going to get into that, because you're telling them something that's conflicting. Drugs are bad, but I see my uncle, my mother, my father using the drugs and nothing wrong with them, because their perception of harm is low. So the family impact is therefore you have now that the entire family ends up using the same substance. A missing parent, mother or father, even when they're not using the drug and they're not using the drug home and they still, because there's some people that will go on binges for the entire weekend, and come home after the binge when they're quote unquote sobered up. So people don't actually see those behaviors. But the missing parent is a missing link. For the son whose father is missing, what is his role model? How does he conceptualize being a man? For a son and mother is missing, how does he understand how women think? How does he get that softer side? For the female, the girl, how does she interact with men after that? Because her father was never around. The quote unquote social slang, as they would say, daddy issues or
So
money.
there's a very
So
real possibility that you remove the influence of these members of the family because of the
yes,
substance abuse. So we can have anywhere from the effect of changes in behavior within the home to the actual loss of the, and I'm not talking about death now, just the absence of the member of family.
yes, and both are hurtful, and both
Mr.
are as
Mi-
let's go to say traumatic.
Please continue,
Mr.
Mr. Jordan.
Mr. Vaughn, I would add to what Mr. Chase is saying by in respect of where the drug use has become normalized because of the use by even parents. And Dr. Chase himself can tell you with his practice and my dealing with this particular population every day is that the difficulty comes because you're trying to tell the young people, the juveniles, well, this is what's happening, this is what is affecting you, this is what is causing your issues. And they're like, but it's just a joint. Or the parents themselves will just tell you straight away, he's just smoking a little joint here doing that, that shouldn't bother him. But from Dr. Chase's perspective and in the medical field surrounding mental health, you also have the fact where they have some children that come about with some undiagnosed mental health disorders, or the disorders that the children do not know that they have, or the parents might not know. And when you couple that with the use of marijuana, use of any kind of drug, then we have a lot of children lasting up with these violent behaviors and these sometimes going to depression, the suicidal behaviors, and it's all because the normalizing of the drug use and the absence of the knowledge that the child may be predisposed to a mental health disorder that never really showed itself before. It showed itself before, but the parents never knew what they were seeing. So in today for us dealing with the young people, most of the ones I deal with on a day-to-day basis, I could dare say that 90% of them have been using drugs or tried it before. And I could dare say that about I will only go 75% on Chase. I don't have direct numbers, but say 75% of them don't have a problem with drug use because it's been normalized to them by family members who use drugs, and it is pretty normal to them. There's not an issue surrounding drug use. So why you that don't even know me coming and telling me that I need to stop doing this or do this and do that when my mother or my father or my cousin is used and he never had a problem, but when they want to tell me it's a problem. And that's what makes it difficult, I would guess, the Dr. Chase to tell you in his practice to try to to reform and reintegrate these young people back into society because they already have been normalized that drugs. I would dare go on and speak to the specific drug, marijuana especially, is just a joint. But marijuana in itself, with the tetrahydrocannabinol, is a depressant, and it causes some serious issues for persons who are predisposed to mental health or who already have mental health issues that are already diagnosed. But you cannot really convince not even the parents. I heard a parent get in court and admit to the magistrate, may he smoke drugs, may he smoke marijuana together. That don't do he nothing. He don't see no problem. That is even cool. He don't. That was her response to the magistrate at the time. Left the magistrate a little dumbfounded, but at the same time, that is her normal. That is the child's normal. And she saw nothing wrong with telling the court that the marijuana just helped her son.
Dr.
Then it was
Chase?
clear is the opposite. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. With
Mhm.
Dr. Chase, I'm going to segue slightly. Um, would it then be fair to say that there needs to be an educational program in place that lets people know that not even necessarily focusing on what are called the illicit drugs or the illegal drugs, but all drugs have varying reactions depending on the person who is taking them, even when taken within the guidelines of how they should be taken. You know, a dose of two, don't take any more for another 4 hours, that sort of thing. A lot of over-the-counter drugs have those kind of guidelines, but is it really a case that we are conditioned or socialized to expect that everybody who takes these is going to have the same reaction to them, and that therefore would
Um,
spill over to the other substances that we're talking about?
yeah, the education is always, or giving persons information has its place. But the adage, 80% of how you give, of how you deliver your message, and 20% of the actual message is what is important.
Mm.
It's particularly when you're speaking about the youth and adolescents. Anything too long, not going to capture their attention. Anything with a lot of words, for most people, they can capture their attention. So how we display the messages is also important. Sometimes we like to give death and gloom to the substances, and some people are very much okay. Well, we can see you just don't know nothing about substances. You really to choose. You never use it. All right, well that's your view, and I have mine. You are from the streets. So how we deliver that information is paramount and important. But and that information needs to be delivered in different medium for the adults and for the children. Also, it is because it's important for the adults to get that message because all our when we speak about breaking the cycle is has can only be broken by the youth, the younger generation. But the younger generation looks up and models the older generations. So if the older generations are not doing what they should, then it trickles down. So informing and giving information is one, and it has its spaces in one very and doing the preventative talks. And there are a lot of agencies, and CSA does that. Substance Abuse Foundation does that a lot as well. And actually, Substance Abuse Foundation and CSA has partnered, particularly this year alone, I think about 4 or 5 times in terms of bringing across those educational messages. And so that is it's not the end all and by all, but it is a start. And but what we really need to get to is looking at the family unit and addressing the issues within the family unit. Because I had a client, youngster actually, a teenager, about 3 weeks ago. And he would have been to probation, counseling at juvenile liaison, different agencies, psychiatric hospital, and CSA. And his thing was, tell me the same thing, whatever. They ask me the same questions, go through the same thing, and it's so he's really like, it's not impactful because it doesn't really matter to me. Um, and I think that is my point with that is that we we tend to think that the same shoe fits everyone. And there are reasons why persons use substances. And sometimes those reasons are within the family. Sometimes those reasons are within the individual because of things in the family. And not, when I say things in the family, it doesn't always have to be something traumatic or blatantly traumatic. But for our youngsters, for example, how much of our youngsters value themselves, understands themselves, and has a self-esteem that make they can stand independent and not follow a quote.
As you
Why
said, that's
why
built. That's built from
Yeah,
within the family. That's nurtured and
exactly.
grown from within the family. Ms. Gota, let's look at the initial response to the discovery that somebody in the family is abusing a substance. Changes have been noticed. Things have, some harm has been done, whether psychological, whether physical. There has been some effect, and it is understood that something must be done. But what? Let's start there.
Yes, thanks for that, Graham. I think that what I found is, and I believe Dr. Chase alluded to it at the very beginning, sometimes we take too long, right, to observe something, to ask for help, because parents may feel embarrassed, or the family members may feel embarrassed. There may be denial, there may be shame, there's blame, right? There's, oh, we can sweep it under the carpet. And what we really need to understand also is, and I always say, addiction is no respecter of persons. So I have found that persons will ring our hotline, ring me, when it is something that's been observed over a period of time, especially if they're deemed as family or family members who should not have these problems, right? The first thing is for us to really normalize asking for help. If they say, see, was it, see something, say
Say
something.
something.
It's always better to be safe than sorry, right? It's always better. If you sense as a parent, or, something just seems to be a bit off, it's better to reach out for help. And the thing is about reaching out for help. You might do that, but then who do you meet on the other side? Right? Are you going to meet someone who actually understands, where there's no judgment? We're in a very small society, and it can be, well, just dash them out the house, or that man wasn't any good anyway, or just ignore, they'll grow out of it. No, we need to deal with it, because if for too long we've been in denial, we've been sweeping it under the carpet. And something I wanted to add also is that education is very important. And Dr. Chase spoke about not just having the education, but understanding. And I say it to the staff, and I say it unapologetically. We are in spiritual warfare when it comes to substance use, right? Because we're talking not just about giving them the education, but the character of that person. Because a lot of the times persons start, even if it's at the experimental stage, many start with just, you know what, I want to cope with how I feel about myself. It doesn't have to be a deep intrinsic pain. It doesn't have to come from abuse. It might be, I don't feel like I look good enough. I don't feel like I fit in. I feel like I would be better or more confident if I started using, etc. So we have to start having a responsibility, and that means not necessarily waiting till, when I say too late, but waiting to call Verdun and Marina House, or waiting to call NCSA or the psychiatric hospital, but starting to raise children who have a level of resilience, that understand that they need to start being equipped to cope with life on life's terms. There is going to be days that you're going to feel uncomfortable, you're going to feel discomfort, and you can't be always running to that high, whatever that high is, right? We sometimes don't allow us to, it's almost like we're numbing how we're feeling through some external, whether that's social media. It doesn't always have to be a mood altering substance. Just numb how I feel, just the here and now. Because we're in this instant society, I am not supposed to feel pain. I'm supposed to be happy, go lucky. If I feel anything like that, I need to look externally. Right? So when I start looking externally, it may start with social media, it may progress, and then they call us or a psychiatric hospital, etc. I start doing something, crime, etc. So the help is there. Verdun and Marina, NCSA, probation. We need to understand that even before we get to that, what's happening. And that is why we cannot just focus on when the substance use becomes substance abuse. We need to intervene early. We are in a spiritual warfare. Yes, education is going to happen, but if I don't feel good about myself, a Dr. Chase and Mr. Jordan can come to me, and it don't mean that, because they don't understand what's going on inside of me.
Well, that is very, very powerful. Let's go back to that starting point, okay? Because we don't want to address symptoms at all. We want to address the root causes of these issues, these problems. And you did speak of building children with resilience, building children with a genuine understanding of the fact that life is life and it comes at you.
Yeah.
Somebody just today, I asked somebody how are they doing, and they said life is lifing. It just
Correct.
is what it is. But there is a sense in which we no longer understand and no longer pass on to the younger generation that weeping endures for a night, joy comes in the morning. It's not going to last forever. So talk to us about building that resilience in the younger children, because we're talking about starting not at teens or tweens, not when they've started to abuse substances, but back when they were small, when they were toddlers, when they were
Hmm.
at their mother's knee.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. So what I think that we tend to do is that a child cries, and there's automatically, normally persons who the parent wants to pacify that child, stop crying, whether that's to give it a sweet, whether it's to give, and obviously, it's crying for a reason. But sometimes when it is, okay, I fell down, I'm crying, sometimes you just have to endure that pain. As you said, it's going to pass, it's not going to be forever. It's okay to express the feeling that goes along with that pain instead of suppressing it, right? Because when we get to the addiction stage, that's just an outward manifestation of trying to cope with something, right? So I think it's raising up children to understand that they do have to endure pain, whatever they deem as pain, right? So even things like sports and, pushing through that pain threshold when I want to give up, no, keep on pushing through. If it means that, you know what, I'm crying. Why am I crying? I'm crying because I didn't like this or I felt hurt, etc. And if I'm going to cry, it's okay to cry. I don't have to have something outside of myself to soothe myself. So I think it's just those small little messages, little messages that are so key that sometimes I think we miss, and it gets bigger. The pain gets larger. It lasts for longer. And when I speak to a lot of parents when they're concerned about their children, and I say, so when did you start to notice this change? It was a breakup of a relationship. It was when they didn't get through some form of educational path. It was some form of rejection.
A
Or as you said,
psychological trauma, which
yeah.
which causes this response.
And it's not a nonchalant attitude. It's life is gonna life. It is going to, and all those emotions, that's what we have been created with, those emotions to give us an indication something's not right or something is right, and that's perfectly okay.
Well, I'm going to come to you in a moment, Mr. Jordan, but I want to go back to Dr. Chase as a mental expert. Talk to us about processing emotions. What are some of the quick tips that we can give to adults who can then pass them on to their children, or even a child who watches this, who may come across this? How can they learn to process emotions? Not to shove them down, not to dodge around them, but to sit with them, feel grief, feel pain, feel hurt, and decide that they can handle it. In fact, I wanted to adjust something you said, Miss Goethe. Not that they have to push through, but that they can. We want to build capacity. We want to explain to them that they are capable of doing what they may not have been doing before. But just because it's something that's new doesn't mean that you are incapable, or you're not built to handle it. That's what I meant to say. So over to you, Dr. Chase. What are some tips about processing these emotions, these negative emotions, or what we call negative emotions, because the emotions themselves are simply reactions to stimuli, psychological stimuli, physical stimuli. Something happens and we have this emotional response. So how do we process that so it does not become a weight on our shoulders?
Right. The first thing I would start with, and the first thing I usually start with, is where Allison left off, where she stopped, where she said we need to normalize and understand that part of life is the discomfort that comes sometimes. And I usually tell not just my clients, but persons in general and my children that life is not just the chocolate in the center on the table that is nice and sweet and whatever. It is also the lime. It is also, the hot pepper. So there are going to be emotions. It all is part of life, and therefore, I think where I go with that is that I aim to change person's perception of these negative emotions, because how we perceive things will dictate how we feel about it and what we do. If we perceive it as being abnormal and unwanted, and as Alison was saying, and trying to reframe that word negative, we then not want to really deal with these perceived negative things. And it really starts with our perception of it. And I think if we are teaching that, we ourselves have to come to the realization that not just life is lifing, but that is life. And our perception of these negative, what we perceive to be very negative emotions, are actually quite necessary in life if we use those things for a positive outcome. And that's why I said the first thing is to change our perception of emotions outside of being happy, and realizing that they're not abnormal. They're not, all of them not pathologic. And I can segue a bit here because sometimes I think with mental health education and all of the education stuff going around, you have a lot of people now labeling themselves with different illnesses because I feel anxious. I have an anxiety disorder. Okay. Most people will feel anxious at some point in time. Doesn't mean that is at a level of a problem or a disorder. You don't have to label everything. In our lives, you're going to feel at some point anxious, fearful, angry, happy, sad, irritable, disappointed. And we have to learn, we have to adjust our perception of these things and realize this is just part of life, and not just that it's going to pass, but it may come back again. And all right, then when we have to get comfortable with the fact that yes, these things do happen and I'm feeling this way. So then we can name what we are feeling. And sometimes when people are using drugs or using anything in a maladaptive pattern, so it might be gaming, it could be pornography, it could be whatever, because you gotta get that discomfort away, is because we don't want to sit and think about it. But really and truly, in order to name it and recognize what we're dealing with, we need to actually sit and think, okay, well, I actually feel depressed today. Why do I feel depressed? Okay, I can't find a particular reason why I feel depressed, but I have these things I want to do. So I have to go to work, I have to go to school, so I have to do this, and do these things, and tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow might break different. This evening might be another thing. And despite not that you're pushing that under the carpet, you are acknowledging you are feeling depressed, but you're also perceiving it not as a catastrophe,
Hmm.
but it's a day, it will pass. It's something that will happen, and I can work to it. And as you said, Graham, I can work to it. Um, that I think is the starting bed for building resilience in everybody. But because it is said in that simplistic, hopefully simplistic manner, doesn't mean that it is that simple.
Well,
But that is
Now
what
that you
was
say
said.
that, I think that you're absolutely correct about the complexity that we are approaching. And Mr. Jordan, I would like to ask you what you think about the fact that a lot of these situations, even in the midst of community, in the midst of family, these situations tend to be born out of a situation where someone feels alone, where someone feels as though they are unique in their experience, they're unique in what is happening to them, and therefore they may respond uh, as Alison said, they're not going to look for help. They're not. That's not their initial response. Would it be helpful if parents became, if they normalized sitting and explaining their own experiences to their children? I'm not saying that you have to get into every single mature situation to a level of depth, but is it something that as parents we can say to our children, hey, daddy had a really bad day at work today because things didn't go the way I wanted to, and my boss actually he quarreled with me and made daddy feel sad. Can we is that something that Barbadian society is ready for?
Well, from my from my one point or my perspective, I do it. I do a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also encourage the children in the clientele that I deal with. I also encourage them to express the emotions. I remember well, 2 weeks ago, I had made a challenge to a young man because of how he's behaving. I was straight up and saying, "This is what's going to happen. You're on the verge of this." And a female staff came by, and as soon as she came by, she realized I was using male tone loud, telling this young man,
Mm-hmm.
"You need to get your act together." And he
Mm-hmm.
started to cry. And she went to rub his head. So I said, "No, no, 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 don't stop him. Let him
Mm-hmm.
go through it." Because the emotion he's feeling is a result of him processing what I'm saying to him. And as you say, you spoke of psychological stimuli and physical stimuli and stuff. Sometimes we try to pull back our young men, especially from going through the psychological stimuli of dealing with situations which the emotions are normal. They're normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a fan of the term bad emotion
Mm-hmm.
or that kind. I'm not a fan of it because I believe every emotion serves its purpose. And I was going on the line listening to Dr. Chase, and he put it in the simplest way. And he was actually going through the process of it, what we term as emotional intelligence. And I do it with a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
youngsters here. Every time I do a session in the classroom, we have to start with emotional intelligence. And I promise you that every last child here at the institution I work at, they can tell you what emotional intelligence is because every session they have with me in the classroom, even if I'm teaching law or something like that, we start with emotional intelligence. And as Dr. Chase put it in a simple way, there's emotion that comes from some stimuli. You'll get the I will use the psychological stimuli. Somebody said something you didn't like it, and we always
Mm-hmm.
discuss the what we call the negative emotions, which is angry, vexed, frustrated, upset. And I say to the boys, the first thing you do, you got to recognize the emotion. And it's
Mm-hmm.
until you recognize the emotion, you're gonna go to what? Recognize the emotion. And once you teach the children to recognize the emotion, they then go to acknowledge that you have the emotion, you're going through the emotion. And from that process, then you go on to choosing the appropriate response. I just give them 3 stages. Just choose the appropriate response given how you feel. And this is sometimes you can find yourself with recognizing emotion, acknowledging it, and then choosing an inappropriate response.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I do because in my agency, I deal with a lot of troubled young people and a lot of angry and violent young people. And Dr. Chase pretty much know the clientele I'm speaking of, but you have be and that's because a lot of things were missing from and you spoke about sitting down with a child. You spoke about sitting down with a child at an early stage and teaching them certain things about how to respond to this and how to respond to that. if a lot of the clientele that we have today and a lot of the issues that we're dealing with in society is because those stages were missing. I heard Mr. Gortet, Miss Gortet. I'm trying not to call your name incorrect. Miss Gortet. I heard her mention just now about the sitting down and going through the different stages with the children. The issue that we have today, when they get to my level or Dr. Faith's level, is a lot of those stages are missing. A lot of them are missing. And when those things are missing, it is very difficult to try to stack something on top of what's missing. You don't have a foundation, you're in big problem. So we try now the issue, what they do now as a foundation for these children, they turn to the drugs, they turn to alcohol, they turn to the marijuana, they turn to the different numbing things, and we met Dr. Pace mentioned the video games and the addiction to the games. That even with the games, they become violent because if the parents tell them to come off the games, no, is a whole psychological thing going on there. That we get children that are not on drugs, but the addiction to the game is just as bad as taking drugs. So the foundation for them for what they need in terms of managing emotions usually end up being using drugs and becoming addicted to some maladaptive behavior.
Can I
But
ask you? Can I ask you to expand, because I think we've been touching on different things. We talked about drugs, we talked about games. Um, I'm going to throw this out to all of the panel. Where else can we look for these addictive behaviors, for these things that can be abused? Because nobody, usually people don't really think about video games. People do think about porn. People do think about videos. Social media was mentioned earlier.
mhm.
Give us a list. It doesn't have to be comprehensive, but give us as
For-
wide a list of things that you know can affect people to this point where they start manifesting addictive behaviors.
from my experience and the clientele that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, the number one maladaptive or what they use to cope with the issues is drugs. And it's substance abuse is the number one thing that we deal with. But then there's also the other underlying things that you have some children that come to us where addiction to video games is a problem, and is the type of games that they're playing, and at one point in time you got parents that sit their children up at 2, 3 in the morning shouting and cursing at a game, would not go to bed, all kind of stuff, and then when they speak to children even turn out to them and are very aggressive and violent because there's this addiction to finishing this game, and it might be they will, and these are children that usually find themselves in the category of calling loners and not really able to socialize in the regular population, so they become a community within a game. So, but my personal experience, or the number one abuse or addiction that young people pick up is the one with drugs. We deal with a lot of drug addiction more so than anything else. I just mentioned those other things because that's what shows up sometimes, but drugs is usually the number one thing that shows up for me.
And for me, Graham, going on what Mr. Jordan was saying, is that dealing at Verdun and Marina House, primarily dealing with grown men, what we find is there's lots of what we call cross addiction. So gone are the days where you could just deal with a person who came in for substance use disorder, just drugs. There's a sex addiction, there's a gambling, right? We even have, and when you even look at, the correlation between crime and addiction and the high that some persons will get by committing a crime is very akin to someone who is just taking a hit. So there's a complexity, and I won't say evolution, but it's always been there. I think we've got just more information in terms of a lot of this cross addiction. I remember dealing with a lady who was so addicted to gambling, and she talked about the process. She talked about the chronic way that she was, going to the slot machines. She spoke about the high that she got. She spoke about the insanity, spending all the rent money. And she was a business owner. She was taking the profits from the business and putting it into the slot machines because she thought just one more ring of that slot machine and I'm going to win. Right. So there's so many different types of addiction. And I think anything where you are seeking to numb or to yeah, to numb, to run away from. And yes, it's the violent video games. It's the sometimes disassociation that even, it doesn't even have to be a violent video game, but it's just a disassociation, a disconnect, right? And then what's happening, especially with the male population, is that then what is happening is that you're having men being raised up with not being aware, understanding, or being able to even identify any emotions. And the only emotion that they think is the masculine emotion is anger. Well, I can show anger, but I can't show the hurt. But I can't show, the frustration. It just has to manifest in anger because that's acceptable. I went to a graduation recently, and we had some of young females talking, and every single one of them saying, um, I was feeling shy, or I felt shy. And I was like, it's not really shy, it's low self esteem. It's because we're seeking to compare. It's because we're spending so much time on social media that if my body doesn't look a particular way or my hair doesn't look a particular way, I don't feel even confident to speak. And so then I'm going to label that as shy when it's, so it's so a myriad of stuff that allows or manifests itself in addiction, which is not always just substance use.
And to add to that, addiction is really a habit that is results in negative consequences is what the traditional thing would be in terms of anything that you do that will result negatively. So as simple as things as even bullying and violence. So when I'm feeling upset, when I'm angry at something or disappointed, I displace my anger, I displace my negative emotion of disappointment, sadness by inflicting pain, doing crime.
Somebody else must feel.
Somebody else must feel it. So, people say you come school or you come work with an attitude, but you're not able to process what you're feeling, so you take it out on somebody else. Then there's some things that people might not even consider to be really harmful, but too little of something is bad and too much something is good. So then you might have someone say, well, I don't hit toes, I'm not going to use drugs, I'm not going to do this. But then, for example, you go exercising, you go to the gym, and people say, oh, well, that's a healthy habit to have. Yeah, but if you're going to the gym twice, 7 days a week, twice a day, and it becomes now your obsession to the point where your body itself is breaking down because it doesn't get time to recover. And that is your way to cope. It's still a maladaptive pattern of behavior.
Panelists, it has been an eye-opener this evening. As we wrap up, I'd like each of you to address how we can be hopeful as we end this discussion. I don't know if you have any anecdotal evidence of people who have come back from family units that have come back from somebody engaging in substance abuse or these addictive behaviors, because as we just identified, there are lots of other things besides drugs. Perhaps you have some anecdotes that can raise people's heads as they see this video and come to the end of it.
For me, I would just I want to say I was going to say half quote but not misquote. I've heard Louis Farrakhan say the other day, when you see men fall, don't laugh. Learn from it. Because the very same thing that caused those men to fall will cause you to fall because you didn't learn from it. So when you see when myself in this field see persons going through rough patches and stuff, I take it very seriously. And I would advise family members that when you see a family member going through rough patches, don't laugh. Learn from it. And at the same way you're learning from it, help them. But if you can't help them, learn from it, because the very same thing that caused them to fall can come to you at some point in time. So that's just my one part about substance abuse and dealing with persons that have substance abuse issues. When you see a man fall, don't laugh. That's just the best way I can put to in my contribution.
Thank you, Kerry Jordan.
My 1 point or 2 points to leave, actually to end, would be one, don't be quick to judge. Don't assume. Don't be quick to judge, because there's always two sides to a story. There's your view and there's a person's view. And really and truly the person's story is what's important. And they're the, how should I say, they're the library of all the information about them. And it really extends onto what Kerry was saying in terms of, don't laugh or look down at somebody that's fallen, because it could be you, yes. So don't be quick to judge, because you don't understand how the person got to that point. Next thing is, be the light that you want to see in others, being yourself first. Aim and strive are not perfect. You're not going to get there. But you strive to be the change and to be the light that you want to see in the world. Because one could say, oh, it's only me and everybody else. No. Your light and your change could encourage one person to do the same. And if they encourage one other person to do the same, there's a ripple effect that can be positive.
Let's go with it.
And I always say, once there's breath in your nostrils, there's always hope. So sometimes we can easily give up or disregard someone because why don't they just stop using? Why don't they should know better. They've come from a good background. And sometimes it's just not that simple. And we really need to learn to allow persons, and Dr. Chase spoke about it, allow persons to speak, because they are the best experts. And I don't claim to be any Bible scholar, but I know there's a part in the Bible, and Graham, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There's a part where a blind man approached Jesus. It was when you read that, it's obvious that he was blind, but Jesus still asked him, "What do you want?" We need to have the ears to listen, so that someone can verbalize, because they know that they need help, but they're the best experts to say, "Well, this is what I need." It was obvious. Jesus asked him, "What do you need?" It was obvious the man was blind, and the man had to verbalize it. He had to ask for help, but he also had to be given the space to ask for help before the healing occurred.
Okay. Wow, those are powerful answers and powerful things to hold on to from our panelists as we wrap up this evening's panel discussion on substance abuse. We are addressing substance abuse in the family. I'm Graham Vaughan. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. Thank you so very much for our panelists, Dr. Ronald Chase, Kerry Jordan, and Alison Gotip. Thank you so very much. And I invite you to join us again on Sunday evening for our next discussion, and all the way through this July of Family Fest, as we bring help, hope, healing, and hopefully happiness. Do have a good night.